here on the High Wire, we're presenting all the news that we find, everything around the world. You see, there's a difference between us and every other news network you're watching. You have to remember, we are not funded by the pharmaceutical institutions. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, all your major news channels are funded by the pharmaceutical institutions. Usually 50 to 70%, they say sometimes. So that means those news anchors are simply giving you the information that pharma wants you to hear. We don't adhere to that. We don't have to. So we're allowed to break stories that no one else. I'm going to show you some things that we broke before anybody else, and now they're catching up with us. Dr. Peter Hotez, who actually works at designing vaccines. This is what he had to say. And by the way, I already told you much of this a couple of weeks ago.
In the early 1960s with the respiratory syncytial virus vaccines, and it was done here in Washington with the NIH and Children's National Medical Center, that some of those kids who got the vaccine actually did worse, and I believe there were 2 deaths. When we started developing coronavirus vaccines, and our colleagues, we noticed in laboratory animals that they started to show some of the same immune pathology that resembled what had happened 50 years earlier. So we said, oh my God, this is going to be problematic.
These same people that are agreeing with me this week tend to say that I'm spreading misinformation. But the truth is that we're bringing you information even before the scientists are. Take a look what I told you on this show 2 weeks ago about the animal studies. Immunization with SARS coronavirus vaccine leads to pulmonary immunopathology, where they seem to do great with the vaccine, even had antibodies, but then when they came in contact with the disease, they actually had a hyperstimulated reaction and made them more sick than they would have been. Now, part of me really found myself grappling with why all of a sudden is Peter Hotez tapping the brakes, and it really made me realize that because something is about to happen that's never happened before. In fact, it may be a really strange type of gift, a stage 1 vaccine trial under the microscope of the American people, of the world actually. Billions of people are about to watch this study take place. Here it is. The initial trial will need 45 healthy adults. Jackson said that no research participants will be given a placebo. What? Wait a minute. I thought we just heard Tony Fauci saying to us the gold standard is a placebo-based trial, yet with the vaccine, we're not going to use a placebo? You're all alert to this now. You're saying, wait a minute, why aren't they using a placebo, especially right now? I don't know how you're going to establish safety in 45 people with a 4-month study. There'll be no look at long-term side effects, autoimmune disease, future cancers. Now think what Hotez and Offit are thinking. This isn't going to be good for the program. If people watch, what if one of these 45 people dies? What if 10 of them get really sick? You know, what if they all end up having massive upper respiratory problems? They'll try to explain it away, but never before has the entire world been waiting with bated breath, watching 45 people entering a stage 1 trial. I think that's what's got Paul Offit and Peter Hotez really nervous. This is a medical talk show. We are here, we investigate medicine, and we investigate, the health of people and how these things affect us. I came over from the Doctors television show. I won an Emmy Award for celebrating the best that science and medicine has to offer for the doctors on CBS. For 6 years I did that. There are 2 other producers that I have brought over from the doctors. One is my executive producer. And then we have people that are various scientists, doctors, and researchers that work with us to bring you the information as we know it. I think we're doing it better than everyone else. That's me. I mean, obviously, I like what we're doing, but here you can judge for yourself. We are the ones winning lawsuits that are making a difference, that are having judges sign affirmatively into action the details of what the CDC can and cannot say any longer. We are silencing those trolls and pundits around the world that tried to point to erroneous, irrelevant evidence to a myth. The Informed Consent Action Network has just won another lawsuit, this time against the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. As many of you know, the Informed Consent Action Network, my nonprofit, has already won lawsuits against the National Institute of Health, the FDA, and HHS, Health and Human Services, and now we add to that the CDC. What was this lawsuit about? Well, as many of you know, we watch the news all the time, and the CDC says that vaccines do not cause autism. It says that right on their website. And we hear all the time that thousands of studies have been done to disprove the vaccine autism link.
Vaccines do not cause autism.
The science around a purported link between these vaccines and autism was thoroughly debunked years ago.
Massive evidence that there's no link between vaccines and autism.
We're not sure as a scientific community what causes autism, but we know that vaccines do not.
A mountain of scientific evidence.
Mountains of studies, or this has been thoroughly debunked. So at the Informed Consent Action Network, we wanted to see the proof of this. And specifically, we wanted the proof for the vaccines given in the first 6 months of life. Since autism is diagnosed starting at 6 months old, if vaccines have any relation, it would be in those first 6 vaccines. And since the CDC says that all vaccines don't cause autism, and there has been, an immense amount of studies done to prove that, we simply wanted to see those studies. This started out with a Freedom of Information Act request, which is something we can do in America. We just asked the CDC, please provide the science that supports your claim. So here's what we asked for. All studies relied upon by CDC to claim that the DTaP vaccine does not cause autism. All studies relied upon by the CDC to claim that neither Engerix-B nor Recombivac's HB, which are hepatitis B vaccines, do not cause autism. All studies relied upon by the CDC to claim that Prevnar 13 does not cause autism, that the Hib vaccines do not cause autism, and that the IPV, the inactivated polio vaccine, does not cause autism. And then additionally, any studies that showed that the cumulative effect of these vaccines in the first 6 months of life does not cause autism. Well, they didn't want to answer that, and they fought us for months, so we ended up taking them to federal court, and we had to sue. Once we're in federal court, we asked the judge to tell the CDC to give us exactly what we requested, and so the CDC did. They gave us 20 studies. They could have given us 100, they could have given us 1,000, they could have given us the mountains of studies because they know we're serious and we want a serious answer. But they gave us their 20 studies. Let me show you exactly what those studies are so you can see what has taken place here. Here are the 20 studies, okay? Here is the problem with these studies. Remember, we asked about DTaP, Hib, Hep B, Prevnar 13, and the polio vaccine. Well, this first study is an MMR study. That's the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. We did not ask about the MMR vaccine. We asked about 5 other vaccines. This is irrelevant. This would be like saying we can prove that there's no peanut allergy by doing a study on almonds. A study on almonds does not prove that a child will not have a peanut allergy. Therefore, this study is absolutely irrelevant. All of these studies in yellow are studies about thimerosal, which is a mercury-containing ingredient that preserves vaccines. None of the vaccines we asked about has any thimerosal in it, so any study about thimerosal is irrelevant. And then these 4 studies in green were studies about the MMR vaccine and thimerosal. Therefore, of the 20 studies we were given, 18 of them have absolutely zero relevance to our question about DTaP, Hib, Hep B, Prevnar, and polio. That means that all that remains is these last 2 studies. Now, this first study right here, the adverse effects of vaccines, is not really a study. It's a review by the Institute of Medicine, some of the greatest minds in science in America. And in this review, they actually do ask about the DTaP vaccine. The question was, does the DTaP vaccine cause autism, or is there proof that it doesn't cause autism? And when they investigated and looked all around the world for all the studies that existed, what they concluded was the evidence is inadequate to accept or reject a causal relationship between diphtheria toxoid, tetanus toxoid, or acellular pertussis containing vaccine and autism. Why can they not say it does or does not cause autism? Because no studies existed. So this study actually proves our point. No study in the world exists that can say and prove that the DTaP vaccine does not cause autism. So this one must be taken away. That leaves us with the final and last study. This is a study that looked at antigens in vaccines. Antigens being either the bacteria or the virus that's in the vaccine. And the question was, if there's more virus and more bacteria, does that make the vaccine more likely to cause autism? So they compared groups of kids that got a lot of vaccines but not as many antigens with a lot of vaccines with more antigens. And they determined that it made no difference in autism. But to prove my point, even in the conclusion, they say that this study does not prove that vaccines don't cause autism. Take a look at this. It can be argued that ASD with regression, in which children usually lose development skills during the second year of life, could be related to exposure in infancy, including vaccines. This study could not prove that vaccines don't cause autism. Therefore, this study is irrelevant too. So when the CDC was tasked with providing all of the science that proves that the vaccines in the first 6 months of life do not cause autism, they were able to provide 0 studies that actually address our question. And yet, all of a sudden, just a couple days ago, was it 2 days ago, we now have a banner that says false information across our video. If you go and try and watch it, or people were telling us, you know, we tried to share it, you go, and now you've got to go to this fact checker. Health Feedback has written an article in which they immediately out of the gate misrepresent, you know, what I said or how I said it. In that video, they say there are no studies that prove vaccines don't cause autism. That was not my claim. First of all, they say that I made the claim that there are no studies that show that vaccines cause autism. That was not the claim that I made. If you watch that video, and you can watch it again, it's out there. You just have to click through all the rigmarole they've put on top of it. But you will know that what we said and what we proved was when we asked the CDC for proof for the 6 vaccines given in the first 6 months of life, they couldn't provide us anything that actually really addressed those 6 vaccines. I get that Dorit Reese and all of these, you know, armchair scientists out there, you know, want to scream and yell. What you need to do is you should demand with me a vax versus unvax study. If you're right, if there's mountains of science that the CDC just doesn't recognize for some reason, and you think you're smarter than the CDC, then please call the CDC and say, will you shut Dell up the only way that's possible and do a vaxxed versus unvaccinated study so that we can show them that the unvaccinated children are actually healthier. They have lower rates of autism. They have lower rates of diabetes. They have lower rates of asthma. They have lower rates of all the things we see skyrocketing in our children as we speak. You know, if you would do that, we could all be on the same team.